Well, guys, we are back with Beyond the Sermon. It's been a little bit of a break in the summer. I know you've missed us. There was a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth, but we've made it back. And I am joined by, of course, our amazing pastors, both John and Zac. Guys, how's it been?
Good. How long has it been? It's been 2 months. How long have we been off?
Yeah, something like that, I think.
Yeah, feels like longer, but it's been it's been. If you live in Florida, of course, you know that it's been a long, hot summer, but it's been a good one.
Yeah.
How about you?
It's been
good. Yeah, I didn't. My Ohio vacation is coming up, so I haven't really gone anywhere as fun as the two of you guys have gone. Not that Ohio is that fun, but I'll keep that to myself. But it is a vacation of sorts. But yeah,
for all of you watching who are from Ohio, apologies from the team.
That's right. This church does not stand by my opinion on Ohio, but yeah. So nothing. Just it was good to kind of just take some time off, and we were going through the Atoned For series, and I think you guys did a great job unpacking the nuances and different perspectives. But yeah, so Zac, how's it been? I know you took a trip to California, and
we were in I was in California the couple weeks ago for kind of continuing education. That which is it's just one of the great things about our, and I think John would agree with me, our tradition places such a high value on education and continuing to kind of expand and not get stale. So try to take advantage of that so that, we prioritize continuing education time and then also resources for that. So it was really cool, going out to California again, this time Northern California with Fuller, and being a part of the cohort once again on foresight leadership, and really talking about technology and the church, and especially the future of the church with AI, which we talked about a lot yesterday with staff, and I think we'll be having continuing conversations with our congregation as well in the coming weeks. But yeah, it's fun. But glad to be back in Florida, though I do miss the high of 73 temperature in Santa Cruz, California, with that great Pacific breeze coming off, because it came back and it was literally, I think the day I got back, the heat index was 118 in Central Florida that day. And I was like, what is happening?
You're back. You're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The heat is overbearing. Every time I think, by the way. Yeah, I'm like,
and John's bundled up. John's all bundled up. He's got his parka on and
swimming through molasses is what it feels like.
I almost had to take my jacket off at 118 degrees heat index.
That's how you know it's hot.
Yeah. No, my adventure this summer has been battling rats, of all things, at our house. So that's been, I think we got rid of all of them, but it's been a whole thing. This is the fun of having a wooden house that has many repairs. So it's been a blessing, and my son likes them. I mean, he's like thrilled when he sees the rats. I'm glad one of us is happy about this. Yeah. And you could hear them scratching in the walls. Yeah, it was creepy, but we're good to go now. So we got the pros out there. Well, gentlemen, we're going to jump in. We started
with that transition from rats to
yes. I have no way to segue that organically, but we maybe the rat race of the summer. I don't know, Rat Pack. We kicked off a new series, which is really an old series, a return to a kind of a blanketed umbrella series called Great Stories. And, just hitting stories about Jesus and hitting stories in the Old Testament that, for a lot of us, if you grew up in the church, you might have read some of these stories as a kid, but returning back to them as an adult, there's a lot of levels we leave out, and a lot of nuances that as we grow deeper in our walk with Christ, we just see really the sovereignty and control of Jesus and God, and also just the fallacy of what it means to be a human often, and the struggle of that tension. But both of you kicked off the story of Jesus combating the storm and the elements of nature, and in some of my questions, I've kind of alluded to. I think it was more than just a storm. I think Zac, you kind of mentioned whether it's Yam, the chaos serpent, or even Zeus, the storm god, that there's a little bit of a divinity call out. Who's the true God? Who's the real God? Who has the power over even the elements themselves? But one of the things I wanted to start us off with was there's kind of this progression with Jesus throughout the Gospels, and if you look at some of his earlier miracles, he does healings, he does exorcisms, he turns water into wine, which definitely show authority and the capacity to do miracles at his whim, as opposed to like maybe Moses having a staff, or kind of pulling upon the Lord, Elijah utilizing the name of the Lord, sort of thing. But up to this point, you still kind of get the sense that they're realizing Jesus is more, but maybe not quite how much more that he's going to reveal himself to be. So even Moses and Elijah performed some signs somewhat similar to this. So my first question is, what's the difference between what Jesus did with the storm, whether it's this passage or even the walking on water, and what Moses was doing at the Red Sea, right? So Moses kind of pulls them back into two so that the Israelites can pass through. But what's the big difference do you guys see coming out of this passage with Jesus?
Yeah, I'll jump in on it by saying first, I think internally inside of Moses and inside of Jesus, the question that I think about with this is who did it?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
who was the action? Who was the source of the action? And with Moses, it was through the outstretched arms of Moses that God did the work of creating the wall of water on the left and the wall of water on the right. But with Jesus, and this is what I love about the passage certainly in the Mark passage we talked about, it is a direct command by Jesus to the water. And so the who did it is, inside of Jesus, like the authority that's been inside of me from all of eternity. That's going to be the authority that's going to act in this moment. And I do think that yeah, I like how you said that this is about a progressive revelation of Jesus. Is that they had these ideas of who he was, but you start adding all these things up, and you start hearing how he's doing these things that are different than how the prophets would have said or even thought about or explained these things to him. Pretty soon, you're starting to put together not only what they're experiencing there, but what he's saying is that this is different. This person is different. This person is different than Moses and Elijah. This is someone that we need to respond to differently, which is why you actually see the response to this, when they were terrified and in awe and asked the question, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? The response is a sense of reverence before greatness, and not reverence for the person, but almost because you remember, like after Moses had gone up into the mountain and had this encounters with the Lord, they like, we don't want to deal with that God that's up there. Mm-hmm. You deal with him for us. But after this, they wanted to worship Jesus. Yeah. The response is, I'm going to recognize that this is the person, and the person himself is the one I want to worship. So that's my. Yeah, I think there are clearly some differences between the two, and that's how I frame that.
Yeah, well, and I look at this as it's an expansion on an elevation of the Mosaic, the Mosaic miracles and signs. And like, in our, one of the ways that we look at the continuity between the Old Testament and New Testament is through a concept of typology. And the idea of typology is that when you see there are types of Christ in the Old Testament, it's not Christ, but there are certain figures that are if not just figures, but elements of the New Testament or the Old Testament, cultic practices and leaders who point forward to the greater completion that is at work in Jesus. This is why in Deuteronomy, there's a promise that there will be a prophetic promise that there will be a greater Moses, and there's this idea that there will be a pointing forward, and when you look at John's gospel, John chapter 6, Matthew does this incredibly well. Matthew is constantly calling back to the Old Testament, constantly going back to the Old Testament and making either direct quotations about fulfillment or making allusions to scenes or moments in the Old Covenant to say that there is this continuity between Old and New Testament. So like you get the same thing in John's gospel, because in John's gospel, when Jesus feeds the 5,000, there's a huge dialogue about the continuity of Moses to Jesus, but not just the continuity, but the expansion on that, and that what and how Paul describes it later on is that those things were just a shadow of what is to come, right? They were foreshadowing of what is to come. And so that's why the Hebrews writer makes such a big deal about the continuity between the priesthood of Jesus, the priesthood of the old covenant, as being a secondary priesthood to the priesthood of Jesus, but there was already a type of that in the order of Melchizedek, and so you get these things where, as Moses is raising his hands at the urging of Yahweh to part the Red Sea, definitively dealing a blow to the broken kingdom of Egypt and Pharaoh, there is a direct correlation between the greater defeat that Jesus is promising in his peace be still on the Sea of Galilee. That the greatest fears that the disciples have, the greatest fears that we have, are totally defeated in Jesus, just as the kingdoms of Pharaoh and Egypt were defeated by Moses. But that was a small microcosm of the greater defeat of the kingdom of the world that Jesus offers. It's one of the things that I think it gets difficult in a sermon. John and I both alluded to this, but you can't really dig into it, is that what is immediately preceding this moment is these parables where Jesus is describing the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God parables are meant to be a comparative study versus the kingdom of the world. So there's always the kingdom of God is like this because the kingdom of the world is not like that. Where there's scarcity in the kingdom of the world, and we're told that there are not enough resources to go around. This is what the miracle of Cana and the wedding feast is about. This is what the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 is about. Where there's scarcity in the world, in the kingdom of God, there's abundance. Where there's fear and chaos in the kingdom of the world, there is peace and order in the kingdom of God. So that's what you get in the miracles of Jesus quite a bit, where even in the continuity, it's a continuity that progresses to greater things. So that I love the connection between the old and new and how you see that typology. And these are things you can't really get into in a sermon, but you can get into in like a Bible study or in a place like podcasts like this. But I think those are such apt connections. And we don't talk about like the connection with Jonah. I don't know, John, if you had that in the back of your head. It was definitely in an early draft of the sermon. I talked about the connection of Jonah. I'm like, oh man, this is not going to get to the point fast enough. This would be a cool side. If we were doing a whole series on just this one passage, we could dive into how the connection is there, even with Jonah and Jesus as the greater Jonah. But Yeah.
That's great. There is a there's a one of the cool things I've found between the Exodus conversation and this one is in Exodus, ultimately they're exiting to go to the promised land. Here you have Jesus kind of reestablishing, if you will, the area of the promised land by pushing out darkness, right? And so I can't remember if it's Psalm 82. But there's a prophecy where God says, I'm coming for you, gods of Egypt, Elohim of Egypt. I'm going to battle you." And he says, "I snare, with a hook, the Leviathan." This was all tailored towards the false gods of Egypt. And so in the same way, you see Jesus now reestablishing this place for his eventual return in Bride. And I think you see an escalation in what, like you were saying, Zac, and what he's doing. Not only is he escalating his miracles, but he is doing things beyond what any prophet would do prior to that. So yeah, that's I think you guys are the Greek guys. The Greek for the words of their reaction are very strong. Like this wasn't just normal. This was like whatever we were just afraid of. This
This is way bigger,
far more terrifying. Yeah, yeah.
It's the mega fear. That's the Greek is that megas phobos, and it's when you attach the word mega to anything, even in our language, it's you're making a big point, and it's equally as pronounced in, and Mark's version too. He gives the trifold mega. With the great windstorm, then the great calm, which is such an ironic, a great calm. I mean, just think that's such an ironic way to put that. And then it leads to a great fear, not a gratitude, not even an expression of awe. It is a terror. It is a like, oh my gosh, and John, you painted this picture so well, like. This is the God of all creation sitting in this tiny little dinghy in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. And like, this is crazy. This is like insanity. And I love the linguistic kind of thoughtfulness that Mark puts in. And Mark kind of gets a bad rap for not being linguistically kind of
he's so
poetic,
succinct, and
he's more succinct.
He's driving to the resurrection, and so he's definitely more succinct. And so, but yeah,
there's some artistry. There's still some artistry there. Like I love that.
Depending on where you fall with, if truly Mark was the first, he was racing to get it out first. Then the others had time to expound on his. No.
Yeah. Well, I'm one that believes in Mark in priority, but it's still, there's these little moments where you're like, he's painting a picture. He's painting an emotional picture here, and how profound is it?
Yeah. So, and we've kind of hovered around these questions, or this next question, but why do you think it was important that Jesus specifically prove he was God through various signs and through kind of the revelation of his ministry? Clearly, well, they're what's his name? Bartman. He's kind of one of the bigger scholars that tries to disprove Jesus ever actually said he was God. And
Bart Ehrman out of UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah,
Bart
and
Ehrman.
And I've listened to a lot of his arguments, and they do fall apart pretty quickly. Not in a straw man way, but just he's a little sometimes out of his depth, I think, with what he's trying to do. But the argument there is that, did Jesus actually ever proclaim to be God himself? And we could, I don't want to kind of deep dive off of that today, but I do think that even if you were to somehow argue that Jesus wasn't claiming to be God, which I don't know how you get around that, he does things that prove something significantly. And I think I think for some bizarre reason, the Ehrmans of the world kind of just glaze over that and move on. I go, no. What he was accomplishing shows who he is. I don't know. So yeah, thoughts on that? Or
well, I mean, when I think about the signs and wonders that are done, including the display of power over nature, I don't think that the first priority for Jesus is to prove his identity to the disciples. I think the first priority is he's got a group of guys in the boat, or a group of boats now, that he's wanting them to get a message. And maybe the message is that he wants them to see clearly who he is. But I don't. When I hear you say this, it's about proving to the world that he is God. I think he wants these guys to have an experience of sort of reshaping and re-understanding who the Messiah is and what the messianic expectations really were all about. Especially when there's still this large strain of political messiahship and booting out the Romans and reestablishing the sovereignty of Israel as a theocracy. So I think part of it is that the focus is on these guys need to see something. Much like I think that somebody mentioned the wedding at Cana, the scarcity and abundance in language. Zach, you mentioned. I think that also was one of those that was done. When you look at that miracle, that was who witnessed it. It was maybe a couple of servants and the disciples. The disciples witnessed it because he wanted them to see something, and I put all that in the context of the we would call it the master plan. The master plan of the master was to pour into these few, and that these few would reach more, rather than just do what I would have done, which is the Independence Day kind of thing. Break through the skies in an amazing and a mega way, and just announce it with a megaphone. Later. I'm here. You're dead. This is game changer. The master plan of the master was not that at all. So that small vision to transform a few people, that those people would be. This is the agency of God, the instrumentality of God, that we are the instruments to be used, and so it's as he uses them in that case, us now, them in that case to bring a message forth. They need to be clear on his identity. They need to be clear on his authority and his work. So yes, he's proving his divinity over and against the prophetic role that of Moses and the other prophets, but he's doing it in a way that is for them. And again, we come back to the thing you said earlier, is that it's now time for them to lock that in more and more. There's this progression of things that's been going on. By the time he hits the cross, or the time he comes back from the dead, they need to have that fully in their bones, the identity of him, because they're going to be the ones to go out and reach the world. So I think it's really focused on them. Like, obviously, clearly he wants he doesn't want, as terrifying as it was, the great fear as there was in this moment, what he ultimately wants is great worship. He wants them to just see him in the words of Thomas, my Lord and my God. He wants them to see him as God and to be the object of their worship.
I think just to amplify something John just said, though, I think that is eminently important, is that the disciples didn't just see one miracle or experience it. They had to, like John used the term, they had to have it in their bones. It had to be so incredibly obvious to them and so incredibly important to them. Not just that Jesus is a great prophet, not just that Jesus is a political Messiah, but that this is God. This is a full man and fully God. And as crazy as that seems, they have, when their 3-year tenure with Jesus is over, there is no doubt in their minds he is who he said he was. So much so that they're willing to die for that truth, because they believe and they know it is the most important truth that they can hold. And in some ways, I think about this a lot too. John just said this, if it's me, if it's the 21st century, and we've heard this, we've all taught the Bible enough to have people say, well, it would have just been a lot more powerful, if Jesus had just broken through the clouds, Independence Day style, and just laid waste to some people, and everybody would have fallen down. I don't know that that's entirely true, that people would have been more apt to believe that. But I also think there's something even more powerful in God's using very broken agents who are themselves fallible to be transformed by the good news, by the power of the Holy Spirit, and then do incredible things because they're so committed to the truth that they've seen and heard. And I think one of the reasons that you see this, not just this storm story, but other storm stories in the life of Jesus, and then later the survival of Paul through the storm at the end of the book of Acts is because it does have this indelible impact on the disciples who witness it. And then for us today, it leaves an indelible mark on us today, because we can imagine, it's very easy for us to put ourselves in the boat with Jesus, in the boat with the disciples on the Sea of Galilee, and feel the anxiety about it. So yeah, I think that's why there's this. I don't say there's not a need. Jesus doesn't need to prove anything, but in order for the disciples to do the work that God has for them to do, they need it. He doesn't need it, but they need it. They need to see it. They need to have that Zach, imprinted on them.
To that point, I think that's what I was thinking is, well, yes, because humans are so fickle in our faith. Mount Sinai, literally above them, storming clouds, don't touch the mountain, you'll die. Immediately, they're like, let's make a cow, like that's
Yep.
immediate. So that tells you everything there is to know about human faith. And then again, regardless of whether you're all millennials or where you are with Revelation, there is a second coming. And there are still apostate people against Jesus. So it's like, the showing up, as much as everybody tries to argue that, like, if he had just revealed himself, I'm going, well, it's going to show that even that won't, people will rebel against him and deny him even regardless of that. But to your point, Zach, what I love about Jesus and God is when they say something for the human sake, right? We should just trust them, but for human sake, they always prove what they say to be true in time and space, if that makes sense. Like, they always go out of their way to go, we aren't just saying something cheaply, because that could be doubted. We could go, well, I didn't actually see the evidence of fill in the blank thing. And there have been many false prophets or false teachers who have said, oh, I'm the Messiah, or I have this thing. And it's like, well, prove it. Show us you can do what Christ did. And of course, no one can, right? And so, yeah, I kind of wanted to wrestle with that, to go, like, one of the reasons I love not just that Jesus is historical is that he proved to us his divinity by doing what he did. No one has been able to do that. There's been no one who could, and that was even if he didn't resurrect himself. He's already surpassed basically everybody else, but he goes, oh, I'm going to show you something. I can bring the dead to life, and then myself through the Trinity. But so one of the things I know, well, and John and Zach, y'all went a little bit of a different direction on the second part. Zach, you kind of, well, I guess both of y'all hit it, but Zach, you hit a little bit more on the storm, our own personal storms. But both of y'all kind of came together with, we can trust God's control over it. We know that he is ultimately sovereign. But the question I have for us is, whether Jesus was symbolically calming, well, not the storm was real, but symbolically saying, I have power over false gods, or there was a false god creating the storm. Either way, Jesus proves his dominion over both. So my question is, they're freaking out. He's sleeping through it, right? And so he kind of pokes at their little faith, that you should have been like mine. And great faith actually looks like having a nap,
Mm-hmm.
because I trust, I trust my father. I trust, in his own capacities, abilities. But what is really the struggle with our faith when chaos comes for us as humans? Like, what are we doubting, or what is it that Jesus knew specifically? Not that there wouldn't be storms, whether these are just life storms or the enemy does come against us specifically. Like, what are we really struggling with as humans here?
Literally had this conversation this morning with somebody who watched both sermons this Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And they were traveling. They watched both sermons, and the question was, and what happened was, the person is in crisis, and the family's in crisis. And the description, I think, answers your question. The description is the crisis becomes so large
Mm-hmm.
and so big, and takes up so much brain space and family space and emotional space, that that you lose sight of who Jesus truly is and what Jesus
Yep.
is fully capable of. And it's only when the disciples, in this case, us in the boat, disciples, us, as we look at this story and remember in this story, it's only when we kind of have that perspective shift that we realize that, oh, wait, he's the one who's in the boat with me. He's the one who has all authority. He's the one who has control over nation, sovereign over nations. And knowing that, it's like these that all of that that distraction and all those things that cause me to forget that. And for whatever the source of that is, whether that's our own, just the pain or the fullness of the problem, whether that's the enemy trying to take us down and make us lose sight of what's important, all of that gets reset, and we are able to focus on the Lord. And it's a game changer. But I do think that it's the weight in the middle of the. I mean, you've done it, I've done it. In the middle of the emotional, weight of the whatever it is, that occupies space. And moments like
Mm-hmm.
this say, all right, let's don't forget who this is. By the way, in the live services, when I called us to trust everyone, this is the same Sunday that we also introduced 10 new members. And I reminded everybody that when we introduce new members, we take quite a bit of time, and Zac, you're usually the one who does this, take quite a bit of time to talk to them about what we mean when we say we trust him.
Mm-hmm.
What we mean, part of what you say to them every time, is that what we mean by that is that we trust him even if things aren't good.
Mm-hmm.
We trust him in those moments, especially when they're not good. And so I think that's I think that's part of the problem. I think, when in a church like ours, and maybe a world like ours, and a society like ours, we also have people who are highly competent people, highly skilled people, highly capable people, and we tend to default to that. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a complicating factor to this question as well. We
Yeah.
default to our skill. We
Yeah.
default to our abilities, our problem-solving abilities, and we forget that the God of the universe, the God of the universe is right there. It's like, all right, you got skills, I got skills too. You could lean on me. So I think
Yeah.
that's another one as well.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I look at this and I think some of the struggles and the question that the disciples ask Jesus, specifically in Mark. I mentioned that Luke and Matthew don't question Jesus' heart here, whereas Mark does. I mean, Mark questions his Mark's version. The disciples are questioning Jesus' care for them, and I always, this story has taken up a good amount of real estate in my head over the years, because on the one hand, Matthew and Luke, he says, why do you have so little faith? And Mark, he says, do you still have no faith? And I'm like, don't we teach people that faith is running to Jesus in the storm? I mean, isn't that what we teach people? Like, we teach people that you have faith, you run to Jesus, run to the arms of Jesus. I mean, we've all preached that. Like, we've all preached that. And yet Jesus is saying that was at best an example of a little faith. And so the great faith is the storm continues to rage and you still trust Jesus. Like, that's like really at the heart of what Jesus is saying when he calls back to them. It's like, why are you so afraid? Yeah, there's a gigantic storm going on, but I'm bigger, I'm greater. And they don't, but there's this sense of doubt that either that Jesus is caring for them in that way, and that his sheer presence is enough to protect them in a big picture sort of scenario. And I think the hardest part when we talk about this story is that Jesus' answer, I don't think, let's say they had exhibited great faith, I'm going to do the little imagination scenario, and they had just rested with Jesus, they would have gone all night in a storm. And people don't want that kind of Jesus. They want the kind of Jesus that shouts down the storm. And Jesus is that kind of Jesus, but that's not great faith.
Well,
that's a little faith.
Yeah.
But people don't want that. And I don't want that either. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm praying hurricane season is so boring that we don't like that. Like, I think that's the hard thing. We don't want the hard time. We don't want the struggle. We don't want the faith building moments, because faith building moments means tough. I mean, means difficult. It means medical diagnosis.
It's the I mean, this is the voice of the martyrs. This is the people whose medical diagnosis was cancer, and they did not survive. And so part of the problem is our knowledge that the outcome of this may be fatal.
Yeah.
So the storm may not go away. So
my original question was, I took it out because I didn't know if we were going to go this way or not. But my original was like, sometimes God stops the storm. Most of the time, he lets it rage, and so it's like, hey, let me show you my divinity. But the understood is, to me, the way I read the little faith part is, don't you know these things are going to happen? Like, this is the promise. There is going to be storms, and yet I'm God, and yet I'm in control.
Well, that's what Jesus. That's literally what Jesus says to him. In this life, you will have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world, and it's not, I've overcome the world, so you're not going to have any problems. It's take heart that ultimately, when I return, I'm going to finish what I start here. But in the meantime, you're going to have to trust my providence, my care, and that even when the storm seems to win in the short term, even when the cancer seems to win in the short term, even when the financial ruin seems to win in the short term, or the relational brokenness wins in the short term, he's ultimately winning. And the peace be still is what is said at the end of this age and the dawning of the next. And that's the ultimate hope. We don't always like that. We want to be in the boat when he says peace be still, not when he says let the storm rage on. And
this storm ended. I mean, again, he's revealing his identity. He's revealing who he is, the power over nature, divine sovereign. This storm ended with the calm and the survival of the disciples, because it is the will of God that these people be the ones to bear that message. It would have been a different story if you'd have said, "Okay, you're going to be the ones." Just kidding. You're going to die right now, and now I got to go get a whole new group of people to do this thing. Now the reason why this story ended up this way is because was the will of God that these be the ones to carry that message forward. So, which is to say, I'm saying that to say this is not prescriptive of how it's going to go for every story.
Yeah,
there's a reason why it went this way in this story. That's not saying it's going to go that way in every story.
To both y'all's point, you think of Paul and his ministry. God protects him but he gets beaten, he gets shipwrecked, he gets, put in prison how many times? And so God's got kind of like his storyline played out. And then he hits a point where he goes, okay, we've done what I'm going to do with Paul. And now I've got others. And that is hard. And yet I never see Paul in between these shipwrecks and imprisonment and all this kind of stuff ever goes, hey, Lord, I've had enough, right? So like the next storm, I'm not going to get shipwrecked again or beaten. And God's like, well,
what does Jesus even say to Ananias when he's picking him up in Damascus? Like he says, I will show him how much he has to suffer for the sake of the gospel. I mean, what that's not a job description you want to pick up and take, right? Like that's not like
Paul says, how joyful is it that we get to join in the sufferings of Christ? And I go, okay, that I don't understand.
That's a perspective, yeah.
But you're not suggesting that we put that on our front sign? Come joyfully suffer with us here.
Come suffer with us. It would be honest though, right? I mean, that
it would be honest.
Because the fact is, and this is what, we have, there are folks in our church right now that are suffering, and we have had people point blank ask us, why is this happening? What is God doing in this? And we don't have a good answer about why God is in the midst of the suffering in a particular situation. But what we do know, this is not always helpful to say to people when they're in the middle of it, but the folks that try to navigate their life of suffering and pain and hardship apart from a relationship with Jesus Christ versus the people that navigate the struggles and the pain and the suffering in a relationship with Jesus Christ, the pain and the suffering and the struggle are the same. The difference is the hope and the peace that are on the other side. We have so many people that say, well, I've left the faith because how can a good God allow suffering and hardship? It's like, well, okay, don't believe in God. Did the suffering and hardship ease up on you because you quit believing? It's a broken world we live in. And the Bible has if you want just the straight theological narrative answer about why the world is the way it is and what God's done about it, it's there. It's a broken world. We exist in a broken world. Sin exists. Sin exists in every human heart. Sin exists in the human structures that we put in place. That's why you have the kinds of situations you have. But the care of our God, the good news is that God didn't even just take care of it from on high. He got in the middle of it. He cares so much that he gets into the suffering and suffers for us in our behalf. And that's the only answer really, is that our God does care, and he cares so much that he gets into the middle of it with us and takes our worst brokenness, our worst shame. This is what the whole Atone For series was about, was unpacking how Jesus got in the middle of it with us. And so that's not always the most comforting thing to say to people when they're in the middle of the actual storm, when they just want Jesus to say, peace be still, and he doesn't.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. From Old Testament to New Testament, we are the suffering yet hopeful people, right? And but yeah, so we're going to pause here, guys, and then we will return with our grow group, small group questions here in a little bit. All right, guys, we're back. Pastor John, Zac, we're gonna jump into the next segment and keep it kind of brief. But what are some questions, if you were in a small group or grow group, that you would launch with?
I would start with the question that the disciples asked: who is this? Spend some time talking together as a group. Really language the person of Jesus. How would you? I mean, that'd be kind of fun exercise to be in a group talking this through. Okay, let's just say it out loud together. Who is this Jesus? Describe him. So I would start. I would start there. I would also deal with the question of the equivalencies of the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Like, what are the modern day equivalencies? Like, most of us don't have fear of. I guess we have hurricane season now. That would be a fear, like a comparable. That's a fair one, especially a recent run of them that we've had here. But on a day-to-day, week-to-week, ongoing basis, what are the comparable fears that occupy? We've said it several times in this podcast. That occupied a lot of emotional brain space on our part. Just start naming those things. As parents, what are they for our kids? As individuals, what are finances, our sense of purpose, identity? What are those things? I would start there.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I would take what you said, John, and kind of expand it, like with the question that the disciples ask, "Who is this?" I would say, and what does this particular scene tell us about who Jesus is? Like, because there are a lot of scenes that paint a picture about who Jesus is, but what does this scene tell us about who Jesus is? And really unpack the rise and fall of the details, everything from the sleeping to the rebuking of the wind to the questions that Jesus asked. Like, what does it tell us about who he is as a person, and what does it tell us about who he is as God? And the other thing I would do is ask the group, like, how do you deal with a feeling as though Jesus doesn't care when the storm just continues to go, the storm just continues to rage, when the storm just continues to just flare up. Imagine Jesus doesn't say peace be still, but he wakes up and says, guys, just relax, just sit with me, like, just, this is going to be scary, but just sit with me. Like, what do we do with the feeling that Jesus doesn't care when he says, I'm going to let the storm go, you just got to sit with me? Like, what do people do with that feeling, and how do they kind of navigate that? And I'd encourage groups that know each other better to really get honest with that, because I think one of the things that we do in our faith journeys is minimize the storm, and not say, oh, it's not that big a deal. I said it a little bit in my sermon, but like I heard a lot of people of faith that just deny that something bad, like, oh, it's not that bad, but it is bad. And it's okay to say it's bad. Jesus was not denying it was bad. He just was saying he's greater than whatever the badness is that's going on. And yeah, you're going to experience it. But like, so I think talking through some of that, the emotional implications of this would be a really um, powerful jumping off point. And then as people feel comfortable, get personal, where is it happening to them right now? Where are they? This is like where you jump into the prayer time. Like, where is it happening right now? This summer, at the beginning of the summer, John led the prayer of healing service in our prayer time on Wednesday nights, and that was one of the big kind of things. Like, people were feeling it, and they needed the community of faith to rally around them, to be anointed with oil, as it tells us in the book of James, and that's what a small group can do with one another, and to be vulnerable in that group and talk about that.
That's great.
Zac, as you were talking about that, it occurred to me that it may be worth talking about in the group to deal with what has been an age-old challenge to reconcile three statements: the statements of God is good, God is powerful, and evil and suffering is real. Just to talk through that in the group.
Mm-hmm.
What are the biblical responses to it? There are biblical responses to that. What are the biblical responses to we're not about to, as Christians, we're not about to deny the goodness of God. We're not about to deny the sovereign power of God, the sovereign grace and goodness and power of God. And we can't deny the reality that suffering and evil is real. And that's too experienced, that's too lived. But the Christians for 2,000 years been wrestling with this question. Well, then how do you make sense of that?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with that? I think that would be worthwhile. I'm even tempted here to start feeding answers into it, but maybe just to stop talking about it now and just let everybody in their own groups talk about how do you reconcile those things, and where are the biblical the responses to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the last one I'd throw out is, has your faith been tested? Saying words and believing words are two very different things. And I think what's revealed in the boat is they maybe thought some things,
Mm-hmm.
but when the storm hits, the truth comes out, right, of how they really feel and what they really believe in and who they really trust. And so my question for those in groups is, have you wrestled with that yet? And this is where I see young faith stumble so often, is they've not yet been tested right? And so they kind of have this naive, like, oh, I believe God, I'd be there the whole time. And then, it's kind of the whole Peter, I'll never abandon you. And then, I mean, the moment, Splinter hits them or whatever. And so I do think God's grace also is in that to give us levels of testing and exposure so that we can learn to trust him more and more. But it's hard.
Hey, can I tell a story on that? Can I tell a story on
Yeah.
that? So my friend Don was a rock climber, and a motorcycle rider, rock climber, kind of a outdoorsy kind of guy. And they went out to Devil's Tower, I think it is, to do some rock climbing out of Devil's Tower. And he said he and a buddy were up there, and they got part way up, and it just started raining like crazy. Cats and dogs, and thunder and lightning were going off there. So probably not their best judgment on on a day to climb, but which he was honest about that. It's just the foolishness of youth. He said, but we got up there, we got in this little alcove up there, and he said in that moment, I mean, literally, it was just a mess all around us. And he said, my degrees didn't matter. My job didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was I need to focus on surviving this moment right now. And he said, it was amazing. It's amazingly clarifying to say that I strip all the things that we put around us in life that can give us identity and I get down to a core essential things. And in this core essential thing also included, what do I believe about God? He said, all these things are just going through your head like in split seconds. So it was an amazing clarifying moment, but it was doing exactly what you just described, Josh. It was saying that when you get in the middle of all this, you get down to what is the essence of being and the essence of identity, and my faith is revealed in times like that. When you go through those tough times, my faith is revealed. It's not formed then, it's revealed then.
Yeah.
And it can be forming afterwards as you realize, hey, God was doing some pretty cool things in me in that moment. But in the moment, it's just revealed who you are. So just, where have your rock climbing on the tower moments have been?
Well, it did have the name's Devil in it, so that was on him. But
yeah, it was a bad start.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're glad to be back. Thank you, pastors, for your good questions and your insight. And we will see you guys next week.